George had begun this reporting. We teamed up, realizing we had an important, good story to tell here, and we wanted to have a good audience and wanted to have a good partner with it. So we approached National Public Radio earlier this year. First reached out and met with an editor, and then traveled. Had a series of different meetings, both locally and back in Washington, D.C., to talk to Daniel Zwerdling about it. And as is the case, as Rosie mentioned earlier about collaboration and kind of the whole brave new world of partnerships in journalism, the reporter was a little bit skeptical. He just wasn't sure, wasn't really, he kind of wanted to talk to some people and see if he could, bounce this off them, and just wasn't really sure if there was a story here or not. So we said fine, and then George pulled out the first of many reports, and we started passing them around, and they started combing through them, and we started to read the reports back and forth to each other, and kind of that icy skepticism started
Wait, what room were we in?
Oh, well, there was a couple of days of this. It was a process, but the first. And we got through the first day to the second day, and so then we reconvened, and they started to dig in a little bit deeper, and we walked across the street from the NPR headquarters to what they call the, the pentagram? The pentagram room at NPR.
Room number 666, and they have a big picture of Motley Crue as nerdy NPR as it.
They're not totally satanic, but I guess that's just the satanic room. So we started to with Danny Zwerdling and Margot Williams, who is their database correspondent, a longtime New York Times and Washington Post database expert, started to compile really that database. Who do we want to go talk to? Really, in totality, what are these reports telling us? What is happening at the Mall of America? But there was still a little bit of skepticism, and then George took over.
All right, so at this point, NPR decided to commit resources to the story, and there are a few ways we collaborate. It could be that we just utilize the audience of a news organization and they run our story. But in the case of NPR, they actually committed reporters, committed time and money to the story, which makes a big difference over a months-long period. But I can still tell that Danny had some reservations if he wasn't totally vocalizing them to me. And that process is really healthy too, by the way. Andy and I challenge each other constantly when you're working on a story. You want a reporting partner who's going to be second-guessing you constantly so you don't get too excited about this or that dimension of the story. So we make the first trip to Minnesota, and now we've got all these reports. We're in the hotel lobby. And of course, since none of them are redacted, we've got phone numbers, addresses. These people aren't difficult to track down. I wish all stories were that easy to find subjects. So we go to the first guy's house and walk in, and he's a classic Minnesota accent, sandals with thick wool socks. You can tell the guy's a Minnesota public radio fanatic. I mean, over the top nice, offering us tea and cookies. I mean, just unreal. And he begins telling us this story about the mall, and Danny's seeing how his image contrasts so much with the way he's presented in the suspicious activity report. This is a key thing to understand about the reports, is the narratives that were written up. All right. The way that this man was cast in the report compared to how he looked when we saw him, it was like night and day. The reports are very subjective by their nature. It's just going to always how it will be with a suspicious activity report, and that's what really struck Danny as remarkable, was that the perspective of the security official who believed this man might be suspicious, that material was going into databases, to law enforcement databases, and this man who wasn't aware of the existence of the suspicious activity report couldn't contrast it. And when we left that interview, Danny was really sold. I could see a smile on his face, and he said, I think we really have a great story about the war on terror here. And throughout that day, we did a couple more interviews. They were just as remarkable. And then we made several trips from there to Minnesota. We went to San Diego to a major law enforcement conference. A lot of the folks were visiting the mall from around the country. So we had to fly. We flew to Connecticut, and Andy and Danny drove up to Orange County from San Diego to interview a couple of guys. What's next?
Findings
Findings in the data.
Yeah.
Or before we lead into to morning edition. You want me to do that part? Sure.
You guys are live. Remember that.
Well, we did I did a few run-throughs first, and I think we're still on our run-through. So, you know, we're also database nerds. Margot's a Excel spreadsheet nerd, and when you get paper documents, it's hard sometimes to glean meaning from them. We knew from the narratives that there was a lot of interesting material and a lot of great stories to tell. But you want to try to take data points in those records and put them into Excel and see what types of patterns are emerging. Margot did the yeoman's work getting that stuff into Excel. When I first got the documents, I was not looking forward to manually entering it into Excel, so I adore Margot for actually doing it. But one of the conclusions she realized as she was looking at the data was that nearly 2/3 of the individuals identified in the reports that we obtained, at least, appeared to be ethnic minorities. And so that led to the shorter morning edition piece they did after the first long All Things Considered piece. And that's what we're going to go into now.